Hey there, welcome to the More Miles podcast. I'm Lauren,
I'm Scott.
I'm Michelle.
and we are part of the More Miles run coaching team. Zach is unable to be here today, he is on vacation, so we have just the three of us here today. This episode is going to be a different style than anything that we've done so far, at least with our coaching team. If you have listened before, you know our podcast is really educational based. We really strive to share information and share it in depth. You know, our podcasts are pretty long form. So when we were brainstorming about our next episode, we were tossing ideas back and forth about the kind of topics that we wanted to cover, the things that we're seeing in our athletes frequently. We had a pretty long list of things that we would like to cover. And if I could dial in the things that we were all pretty much in agreement on that we wanted to talk about, they happened to be things that each of us as individuals and as athletes are currently dealing with. So I kind of thought that for this episode, we would go to more of an interview style. And this is still educational based. We're sort of using ourselves as an example, but also telling your personal story and putting that into the mix. I think something else I have really realized over the past couple years is that I used to be very private about my own training and my own experience when it came to talking to my athletes. I didn't want to put my personal experience into their personal experience. But I've actually realized over the past couple years that sharing your own story, your own journey, your own experience is really helpful to the people that you coach, to people that follow you and are interested in what you're doing, because it helps them to see and to understand that they're not alone. The thing that they are struggling with or dealing with or working through is not a problem with them. It's something that people go through, people deal with, and overcome eventually. And so I think it's helpful to share your personal experience and your personal story. And we're using that to sort of set the tone for an educational format as well. So we are going to shift gears to Scott first. Scott is going to act as a guest on the More Miles podcast for a few minutes here. To tee up the two topics that we are going to cover today, using primarily Scott and Michelle as examples, are going to be recovering from or working with injury and illness and the recovery process for that, and how it may or may not affect your upcoming goals, how it may affect your training season, your plans for the year ahead. We're going to talk through all of that: injury, illness, recovery, and the process of it. The other topic that we're going to talk about is overtraining, where it comes from, how to recognize the symptoms, ways that it can be really tricky to recognize the symptoms, and then what you do about it when you have identified what the issue is, how to handle it, how to work yourself out of it, and again, sort of what that process looks like and how it may affect the rest of your calendar, what you are looking for or what you are working toward ahead. Yeah. Okay. So Scott, we're coming to you first. Usually we start our podcast with sort of an update on, hey, how's your training going? Where are you at? How are things going? So let's just start right there. How are you doing? How are things going? Fill us in a little bit on yourself.
So I'm better now. Today, I'm feeling really good. So the training is non-existent right now, meaning 0 miles. Um, yeah, so I'm injured, but it's a different type of injury. It's not a knee or a muscle thing or anything. So I've actually been diagnosed with pericarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, basically. The pericardium, I think I'm saying that right, is basically the lining around the heart. And so when that gets inflamed, it causes chest pain, it causes dizziness, it causes different symptoms. Kind of, when it comes on, it's almost like a heart attack. You feel like you're having a heart attack. So, but luckily I'm not, and so I've been diagnosed with that. So it's very rare, apparently. I've done some research on it, and it's one of those things that is rare, but also just unpredictable in terms of what's the recovery like. how does somebody get it? It's just it's a mystery. It could come on from an illness. It could come on from different ways, but you know what I've been hearing is currently in kind of the present day is there's a lot more cases of this post COVID due to that virus. It's typically like, they say like most commonly a virus will manifest, whether it's COVID or the flu or something like that, and then yeah, your heart just gets inflamed, right, as it's trying to fight that off. So who knows? But kind of I'm working through that. That's been the last 3 weeks that I've known that I've had it. But I would say that I would back up all the way back to January is when I knew something just wasn't right. Like I was sick and just I was off a little bit, and I was training straight through that. So yeah, back in January, I was having dizzy spells. I was having high blood pressure, and for no real reason. There was no real apparent kind of correlation to it, and so I've been in primary doctors, I've been in specialty offices, cardiology offices, hospitals, just trying to figure out what is going on. Um, Treated it as high blood pressure, hypertension is kind of in the beginning. But every couple of months, there was a new symptom. First it was high blood pressure, then it was dizzy spells, then it was um, something else, and then most recently, it was really this pain, this kind of this not a stabbing pain, but just a very deep pressure, kind of like somebody put a weight on my chest. Um, yeah, had blood work, and kind of the diagnosis was, yep, it's pericarditis. So haven't been running for 2 weeks. I'm at 0 miles for the last 2 weeks. So that's the current state of it. What I would say is that I'm not.
I and
Yeah,
can I add a little
yeah,
color into that
yeah,
too? That sort of a little bit different than an injury. This is something that you had a really hard time getting to the root of.
yeah.
You had known for a while that you didn't feel right. Something didn't feel right, and you had
Hmm.
to really work with your physicians and your specialists on your team to get to the point of getting a diagnosis.
Yep.
I want to highlight that because I really applaud you for doing that, for advocating for yourself. And I want to highlight that as unfortunately sometimes part of the process, whether it's injury or illness, that what your care team is seeing on the surface maybe
Hmm.
isn't the whole story of what you are experiencing, you are feeling. And so we see that in injury sometimes too, that it takes what feels like way too much time
Hmm.
to work through the loop, jump through the loopholes and jump through the hoops and all of that to get someone to listen to you and do more testing, more,
Hmm.
getting to the bottom of the source. So I want to
Yeah,
highlight that as part of the story here that if that's something you are dealing with, whether it's an injury or an illness, keep pushing. If you don't feel right, keep pushing
yeah,
because ultimately you've been able finally to get a real diagnosis and a treatment
yeah,
plan after
yeah,
months.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think knowing your
Sorry,
body.
I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
no,
but
no, 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 no. That's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like knowing your body. And as a coach, for example, like if an athlete comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm not feeling well," right, or I'm off, or I've got this injury or something, it's probably the biggest thing that I recommend is like trust your body, kind of listen to your body. I mean, you know you know when something is off, when something isn't right. Um, yeah, and I I wouldn't say question everything all the time, but this one, in this particular case, I know my body. I knew, yes, okay, high blood pressure. Yes, it was sitting right there in front of me. The monitor was showing, yes, I have that. But I was telling all my doctors that's fine, but that there's something else. There's something is off. And so, yeah, I mean, just it's hard because you got to keep going back and you got to keep questioning and you got to kind of figure things out. But yeah, if listen to your body, trust it. There was countless runs in the last 7, 8 months, for going back to January, and I've put them in my log, and I told you this numerous times. Is it? I would complete the run, but let's say in the beginning of the run, the first 2 or 3 minutes, I would be just warming up and have this like this sudden feeling like wait a minute, that's not right, and it's deep in your chest. It went away within a couple of seconds, and then I went on my merry way, and I did my run and everything. Um, and so yeah, it's like, okay, what is that? Like that's not normal. I've been doing this for far too long. I've listened to my body way too much. That's just not normal. Yeah, so you just got to keep asking the question, like what is going on, and um, sometimes it's taking a
So
look
can
at
you touch a
yeah.
little bit on go talking about your training, going
Hmm.
all the way back to that January, February
Hmm.
timeframe when things you were first aware that things were not right. What did your training look like from then through, like just recently when you've gotten
Hmm.
this diagnosis?
It was very consistent. Ironically, it's probably the most consistent in terms of, I would define that as most consistent weekly miles I've had in a very long time. From January until the most recent diagnosis, I mean, I was averaging flatlining, 40, 45 miles per week. Like it was pretty consistent. Now, it was slower miles. I knew as things throughout the year kind of popped up, I was like, okay, I could still run. Everything was okay there, but I knew I had to slow things down. So I ratcheted back the speed, the workouts. It's been all year a lot of long, slow miles, or daily slow miles, I should say. Um, haven't really done many workouts, haven't done much speed. Not necessarily that I couldn't have per se, but I think as I was trying to tackle what it was that was going on, and we talked about this, it's like, hey, let's just focus on effort, right? Because when you focus on effort, you're listening to your body, right? Like I could say, okay, I'm going to give it a today an effort of 3 to 4 out of 10, and that's a certain heart rate, da, da, da. But it was more of, I would wake up and I would go for a run. And if I felt like walking for half of the run, that's what I did. If I felt like running the whole time, that's what I did. So it was a lot of just day by day, kind of seeing how the body felt that day. And typically it was always the same. It was always this fatigue, it just felt off, right? And so then it became like, towards the end, it was like, well, how much of this is mental, right? How much of this is really maybe anxiety induced of me just thinking, oh my gosh, something is wrong. And yeah, that kind of played into it. But I think that also played into how I actually got the diagnosis I got, is me being anxious about what is going on kept me questioning. Okay, I got to keep questioning, 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 and got to really what I needed to hear. Versus had I just been like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, and just kept going, probably still would have gotten to the same end result. But yeah, I think there was part of it as a benefit that I just kept questioning it to figure out what was going on. But yeah, the training actually is pretty consistent all year, which is why now that I'm not running, I feel very confident. More confident than going into any injury, because I've had surgeries on knees and feet, and I've had all of the kind of the running injuries that you can have, plantar fasciitis, et cetera, et cetera. And those you kind of know what you're up against. Okay, I'm on the shelf for 3 months because I got to recover from surgery, and then you're looking at it and you're putting pencil to paper of, okay, come 3 months, what am I going to do? How's it going to look like? I got to ease back into things. This one I just don't know. Like it could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months, it could be longer, until I can actually run again. But um, I'm confident in the fact that I put in such a good base, right, of just purely time on feet for the last 7 months, that optimistically, if I come back quicker than later, um, it's not going to derail anything for the fall. It may change how the goals are, but I'm keeping it positive and thinking that my fall is going to be the same as I always thought it was going to be. It just maybe a little slower, but yeah. So that's how training was all year. Was really just kind of just getting out there and just not worrying about the speed, not
Did
worrying about
you
the workouts. Yeah.
did you notice, like, you were running consistently, but did you notice any difference in your recovery from the runs, or was that just typical post-run feelings?
It was typical. And actually, I felt very good after the each run. I actually was looking at it as, hey, this is fantastic. Like I wasn't spent after runs. Like typically after a workout or a long run, I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm spent. You're putting the protein back in your system, kind of getting yourself recovered. Um, I was moving slow enough and kind of hiking a lot and walking a lot in my training that I was like, okay, I'm just building a big engine. And I never really was, after the run that day or the next morning, was fatigued or anything. Now the good thing is too for me that I think helped a lot was I was trying to tackle the symptoms. So I was changing my diet. I was sleeping more. I was really
Mm-hmm.
watching some of those signals, and I think that that helped. Like if I was to do the last 7 months lifestyle that I did 2 years ago, yeah, I'd probably be wrecked. But and even more so now, knowing what I have, the condition I have with inflammation, just from a recovery standpoint, I mean, I literally am looking at this as okay, pericarditis is inflammation in the body, just so happens to be near the heart. So how do I tackle inflammation? Because that's the treatment for this is rest and anti-inflammatories. There's no, you know, pill, there's no shot, there's no, surgery per se. It's like get your butt resting. And the anti-inflammatories are going to help. It's going to ease some of the pain. Um, but yeah, like changing my diet, eating definitely much less high, less inflammation is in my diet is how I'm putting it. Um, Sleeping like a
Mm-hmm.
baby. I mean, and maybe that's part of it because the body is fighting off the inflammation. I've never slept better. 8 full hours throughout the night. So I think that's part of it too, right? Like knowing when you're injured or you have something going on, listening to your body and then saying, okay, how do I recover from this, right? And so I'm looking at my recovery, my diet, my sleep as training. That's my training right now. I can't run, so what can
Mm-hmm.
I do to set myself up for success in the fall? And that's what I'm doing.
That's a great
I
mindset.
think you really just hit something on the head there. I think whether it's illness or injury, the healthier your body is as a person, the better you eat, the better you sleep, the better that you take care of yourself in general, the easier time you are going to have coming back from injury, illness,
Hmm.
whatever it is, either of those things, than if you were not taking care of your body in the same way.
Hmm.
Like you said, if you were not eating well,
Yeah.
not sleeping well, high stress, all of that. So I think that's a that's like the best thing you can be doing for yourself is
Yeah.
taking care of your whole health, not hyper focusing just on the issue at
Yeah.
hand, but what can you be doing
Yeah.
to help with this.
Yeah.
um, the other point that I wanted to emphasize in your journey is sort of the 2 steps forward, 1 step back process that comes with an illness or an injury. And to be clear, when we're talking about illness, we're talking about think like what Scott is dealing with, or COVID, or the flu, pneumonia, those kinds of things, not a cold. Like if you have, sort of normal minor illnesses, that's a pretty, maybe we spend a week or a two adjusting. We're talking about maybe something more significant that's really affecting your training and on a long-term basis. Um, but with you, for example, while your mileage was able to be consistent, what we were struggling with was getting the speed work back in there and knowing you wanted to be working on your speed, um, with a marathon goal coming at the end of this season. But like we just couldn't quite get there. We kept like it'd be like, okay, you'd
Hmm.
get to a spot that you'd feel pretty good, and we'd say, okay, let's put a speed workout on the schedule for next week. You'd get there and maybe it wouldn't feel right, or maybe you would try it but couldn't complete it, or something along those lines. Up until the point we got this diagnosis, and it was like, okay, we're not going to try
Hmm.
that. We're going to take this time, hard reset, hard rest, because we finally had something to pinpoint and to
Hmm.
make an objective plan.
Yeah.
um, but even since you've had the diagnosis, it's been a little bit of, well, why don't you elaborate on the advice your doctor gave you in regards to running and, keeping your heart rate low and your effort low, and how we have sort of tried to play with that, and maybe where we
Hmm.
are now with what you're actually doing in terms of training.
Yeah. So I've asked 10 different specialists, what should I be doing right now and how should I be doing it? Because um, my primary cardiologists that I'm seeing and other doctors all have different answers in terms of how I should be tackling training.
Mhm.
Now, none of them, I don't know, maybe they're athletes, maybe they're not. But my take on it is okay, I need to get healthy, right? I need to tackle this just for life. I need to get healthy, but I'm an athlete. That's what I'd love to do. So, asking my doctors, when can I run again? When can I walk again? When can I, be physically active? And the canned response is always, well, no physical exertion, right, until symptoms subside. And it's like, well, what does that mean, right? Like define that. And
What does
so
physical exertion mean? Like, do they,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah, it's exertion. And so I tell you, the person who gave me the best advice was Zach, was saying, yeah, this is a doozy of a diagnosis, and you want to make sure that this is symptoms are cleared up. Because if you're like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I feel a little pressure on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's a 1, and I go out there and try and run, he's like, that pressure scale could go from a 1 to a 10 overnight. Like, it's so delicate. So that's what I'm approaching it as, and I've
Can I
gotten that
real
from other people.
quick interrupt you?
Yeah, yeah,
Can I just put an asterisk real quick to let people know Zach is a doctor?
yeah,
Just so that we're not,
yeah.
this is not advice from the running coach. Your running coach is not the appropriate person to give
Good
advice
point.
here. Zach is a doctor, and he is giving advice from that with that professional hat on. Okay,
Good call out.
continue.
Yes. But that's knowing that, and then I was just talking to my cardiologist, like, I don't know, a few days ago, and I said, hey, like, when should I expect the pressure of the symptoms to kind of go down and be alleviated? And he said, listen, with you, right, using me as an example, he said, your stress test, your echoes, all those things look so fantastic that you're probably on the best case scenario, right? Your heart's strong. You're not showing signs that, like, oh my gosh, like, you need to really sit down and be not working and not doing anything for months. He's like, you know, test it out. He's like, go for a walk, right? And keep your heart rate, I don't know, arbitrarily under 100. He's like, I don't know you as a runner. I don't know how high your heart rate goes. And I'm like, yeah, 190. And he's like, okay, well, keep it under 100. Um, and test it out. He goes, if you start to see on a walk, your heart rate is spiking a little bit when it normally wouldn't. He's like, you've run for so many years, you know this. I'm like, yeah. He's like, stop the walk and go home. Right. And so that's kind of how I've been approaching it, is looking at the walk. And so I started just walking every day. I think it was 4 days ago, 5 days ago. And the very first day, I was walking at a slow pace, like almost looking down and watching my steps, and my heart rate went up to like 115, 120. And so I was like, okay, well, it's not time. And today, for example, it was 90 at the max, and I walked for 2 miles in the blazing heat. So there's the signs that we're going for, and then but it's also throughout the day, right? Like, so this is something that I'll notice in the evening when I'm rested, if sitting on the couch or whatever. I'll be like, okay, how do I feel right now? And everything is trending in the right direction. But from an exertion standpoint, the doctors call that like walking or lifting, right? Like, I'm not going to go in the weight room and do benches and squats and all of that. They're talking about like, hey, we have to tell people who work in construction, we have to tell people who work in daily 8-hour jobs where they're lifting heavy things, hey, don't do that, or scale that back, right? And so that's typically what the masses or the general public, I would think, would look at it in terms of like exertion. For running, the doctors are looking at it as like, that's not something that you should be doing right away, but you know your body best. Now, the other thing I will say is that I've done some research on elite professional athletes who have had pericarditis, and it looks really good. Like, some of them just bounce back right away, right? And again, my doctors are saying, yeah, because they're incredibly fit. Like, their body is really equipped to tackle that illness and just fight it off, and they come back quicker. Versus somebody who's sedentary and just doesn't do anything, and some of the other health markers maybe are not as good. It's going to take their body longer to fight it off. So yeah, I mean, that's promising. And so, yeah,
So, talk a little bit about your mindset. I have sort of a two-part question here. How are you handling your mental health in this moment where, okay, we do have a diagnosis,
yep,
but that doesn't mean that you're returning to running yet. Like, there's this
yep,
space between identifying the problem and the process of working your way back to running. So you're not running right now. You are walking, you are making progress. But how are you handling just your mental health and your mental outlook while you're in that phase where you haven't been able to begin the return to run program yet?
Yeah, it's been tough. Yeah, mentally, it's I gotta kind of every day think about, okay, like how am I handling this, right? Kind of take inventory of myself and like, okay, where am I at today, right? So I think from a mental standpoint, it's hard, yes, because I want to be running, I want to get out the door, and I want to do it. Um, Interestingly enough, though, my mindset is much better with this than it was when I had my knee surgery, and it was a very clear, defined, hey, you're getting your meniscus worked on. That's 3 months to the day. You can start running again. Mentally, I was more anxious and more frustrated because I'm like, oh, I just want to, I want to run right now,
You're just
surprisingly. And
waiting. Yeah.
yeah, like I just don't know. And I think that brings a little bit of ease and calmness to the mindset of, you just can't force it when you just don't know. Um, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I would have thought if you would have told me this before I got diagnosed with this, I probably would have said I would have been a mental wreck. But I'm really not with this injury. Um, and then all the other life stressors, right? I mean, that has things probably more occupying my mind than running does, I should say, not this condition. So the mindset's been good. I think um, part of the process of every day kind of taking inventory of where I'm at, where's my headspace at, is I keep reminding myself, you've been doing this for a long time. Your body will heal quickly. Um, I'm not starting from scratch when I come back, even if I'm on the shelf for a longer than period of time than I want. Um, Mentally, I'm reminding myself I've been doing this, 80% of my life that I've been alive, I've been a runner, and I'll bounce back. And it may not be the fastest, but I'll be fine. And I've got to keep reminding myself that. Now, the mental part that kind of is like, is I kind of had these really aggressive goals in the fall, and so it's like the mental like is every day that goes by that it's like, okay, I still can't run, I still can't run, I still can't run. It's the clock's ticking because I know, like, if I get into September and it's like, okay, well, can I really run that marathon PR being sidelined for this amount of time? But I guess I just got to keep reminding myself, like, I can't look at that far. I just got to keep going day by day, I guess.
That was exactly the second half of my question is
Hmm.
how are you you have a goal on the calendar. It has a date. It
Hmm.
is an established thing that's looming. And how you are looking at that and how you are looking at your next several months along the way. Like, as your coach, we have not taken that off the table yet. That goal is still there. It's sort of still too early to really know what we're going to do with it yet. I think it's too early to take it off the table. And I think
Hmm.
it's too early to say, yes, definitely. Right. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think you kind of already answered my question, but I really admire and respect the way that you are looking at your health as a whole. And I think it's very easy and it's very tempting to want to get back to running, want to get back to that, like, the next thing, you have that goal on the calendar, you need to get to it. And you are doing a really fantastic job. And it's not easy. I know that it's not easy. Um, to really focus on your health and not just performance, and that health and performance are two different things. If we're doing it well, hopefully they go side by side, but they don't always. And prioritizing your health above performance is
Yeah.
really admirable, and difficult, I know too. But
Yeah. Well, I think
so
coming, yeah.
how
Okay.
are you looking at that? The next, so mid-October is
Hmm.
the goal that you have on the calendar. What's your mindset in regard to that race specifically, or that goal
Hmm.
specifically?
Um, yeah, I think I fall back on my confidence in myself. I think that's where I'll open up about, I have Yeah, and I really don't kind of open up too much about my own kind of racing and all of that because I don't have that many goal races every year. Usually it's a JFK and maybe one other race that I'll try and target. Um, but I do have a lot of confidence in myself, meaning I don't if I'm not hitting certain workouts, right, I don't look at that and say, "Oh my gosh, like I'm not on where I need to be. I'm not on pace where I need to be to hit this goal." Um, I fall back on, I've done it before. I can do it again. None of my training blocks have ever been perfect. I mean, none of my training blocks have ever been 75%
Yeah.
perfect. There's always something in there that I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have tweaked that a little bit or didn't do that, right? But it's never perfect. And so I'm looking at the fall as like, this is what it is. And if I look at the year as a whole right now, the first 7 months were pretty damn perfect, other than not being able to get the speed work in that I wanted. But um, yeah, I'm at the most miles at this point in a calendar year than I've been in a very long time because each year, even though I've had incredible fast track workouts and I've done 20, 25-mile long runs that have really looked great on paper, there's always been something every year that kind of derails things, whether it's life, whether it's, another injury, whatever. This year, that hasn't been the case. Like, yes, there was something going on, but I was still able to train. So I lean on, to answer your question, I just lean on the confidence that I have, not only in the good things that have happened this year in training, but the last 33 years that I've been running. I do feel like if it came down to it, there's going to be mind, muscle memory, if you will, that will take, it may hurt like crazy, but yeah, I think it's just looking at it that from that standpoint instead of looking at the clock and saying, okay, I got to be back running by September 15th or else this is off the table. Like I'm looking at it a different way, right? But also I'm realistic. Like, hey, it may not happen.
It may not happen. Yeah. I really like that perspective too, because the confidence that you have in your history is huge. That's a big deal. And I feel like we spend a lot of time talking to athletes about that when they are, even when it's in like a very short term kind of low spot, a head cold or something like that, or an injury or a bigger thing, that it's not just the micro. It's not just what you're doing today. It's not just what you're doing this week. And it's really not just what you're doing this training cycle. Your performance and your potential is a culmination of years and years and years and years. So I love that you have the confidence in your history, but I also love that you have the confidence in your trajectory of, if this race doesn't happen, there's going to be another one. Like,
Mhm.
running is always here. So
Yep.
that one thing doesn't need to be life or death. You don't need to sacrifice your health for the one thing, because there's going to be another thing,
Yep.
no matter what.
Yep.
I like that, all of that. I feel like we could keep talking about about this and about where you are and how you're feeling. I do want to get on to our other topic though, so let's close it up there and just thank you very much for sharing. I mean, that's something really personal, that you have been working through and dealing with, and it's been a challenge, and I really appreciate you sharing that much personal detail of where you are and where you're going.
Yep.
And I think and I hope it's a good example, an inspiring example too, of when you're in the thick of something, an injury, an illness, whatever it is, how to work through that. And that there is maybe no blueprint, but these are the strategies you can use to
Yep.
sit in it, be
Yeah.
patient in it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Easier said than done. Okay. So next we're going to move on to Michelle. Michelle, you now get to be a guest. Scott, you can come back over to the podcaster side. Okay, so same style. Like I said, we kind of have been opening every podcast with just a coach's catch up, where we are in our training and what we're doing. So let's start there. How are you doing? Where are you at in your training?
Yes, it's been a while since we've been on here. And I think the last time we spoke, I was still on my big goal of climbing from 1 mile to 50K or 50 miles or whatever it was. That was going to be a last minute decision too. And now I'm not training also. So we've got half the run coach squad is like down and out. I am running though. I will say that. So, God, when was it? I don't even know. So there's no definite start to when this all kind of happened, I think. But I'm going through overtraining syndrome, which is, I've been running for 20 years and I've never experienced it. So I think as a coach, this is a very different side of training. So I'm running right now. I did take a couple weeks off and I would try a run here and there, but I'm not injured or ill physically. I think it's more mental. And it's funny because it surprised me because I wasn't in any type of high mileage situation. I probably had the lowest mileage I've had in 10 years when it kind of snuck up on me there. So I was training for the Steamtown Marathon in October, was the goal race. And then I had like the Charles Street 12 is like a tune-up race coming up in about, 3 weeks now, 4 weeks now was the goal. And then deciding how to go after that. And I've totally taken it off the table. It's gone. It's definite. Like I'm not doing any fall racing. As I know right now, I might add something in last minute. But I want to say like overtraining syndrome did not come from running. Like it sounds so ridiculous, but my mileage was lower than it's been in years and years and years and years. And that's when it hit. And it wasn't something I was expecting to hit me at that point.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I think you opened up with, gosh, where did this start? I don't even really know when it started.
Yeah.
Boom. That hits overtraining syndrome on the head because it's not like an injury or an illness where it begins. It's a process. And sometimes it can be a years long process. It's not necessarily, a season or a month or something like that. So I think you hit the nail on the head here. How much are you, so let's talk about training first. Over the past year, you have had marathon goal, a half marathon goal. You have been training. Well, let's even back up further than that. You have had 3 consecutive marathon training cycles.
I've had more than
we
that.
Backed off. Yeah.
Except for injuries, yeah. I've trained, this is embarrassing to say, I have trained for 8 marathons and completed 3.
No, well, like, let's talk about.
So for 8 years, I've been training for marathons. This is terrible.
Training cycles. Let's look. You did 3 consecutive marathon training cycles, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just recent history to build that up a little bit. We did back off to a half marathon training cycle in the spring.
Yes.
And then at the point that this was more definitive, we had started building some marathon fitness, but you were really still in sort of a 5K, 10K speed phase.
Yep.
We were beginning to build mileage, but it wasn't intense yet. How much are you willing to, you share as much as you are willing to, about not only your training, but also life outside of training and how your sort of cumulative stress was adding up.
Yeah. So we took spring marathon. So when I was making my plan for this year, I intentionally took spring marathon training off the schedule. I had very early, it was March with the Myrtle Beach. Yeah. I can't even remember. Like this year's been such a blur. When was so I did a half marathon. I did train hard for, and didn't hit my goals, but like, whatever. I was like, okay, my normal MO with this is I don't hit my goal or I don't do something. I just bounce back and just immediately start the next cycle. Let's go. Next goal. Let's keep going. So that was, I was like, let's start with a mile. Spring's busy. Life is busy. Work's going to be very busy. My kids are in, very intense sports schedules. So I knew it was going to be too busy to do another half marathon probably, and definitely another marathon. We're off the table for the rest of spring. So that's where we started, like the mile, the 5K, the 10K. And I had 10K in July, the Arbutus Firecracker 10K. That would be like the end of spring training or summer training, there. And then we would move into the distance events. And so I did notice, like after the 5K, that was like my own solo 5K that I had done. After that, I was super motivated for maybe a week. And I'm like, I can't wait till the 10K. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to PR every distance this year. And then like, it was kind of at that point where I think I thought there was a light at the end of the tunnel with life stressors. Like June will come, June's going to be very busy, but once June is over, I'm going to hit the ground running. It's going to be great. It snuck up on me. The whole thing just snuck up. It was very little things. And it's funny because as coaches, like, you read your book about overtraining syndrome and like, here's the key things to look for. Each of them snuck up one at a time. So like, it didn't dawn on me that this is what was happening. I just kept thinking life is busy or whatever. So after the 10K was coming up, and that was where I kind of started missing runs. And that's not me. I can count on one hand maybe the times in a season where I miss a run. Like I'll try it, I'll get out there. It might be not great, but I'm going to go out and do it. I was starting to miss probably as many runs as I was doing, which is not typical. And that still didn't trigger anything. I'm like, life is busy. I just can't train right now. Oh, this happened. So that kind of started, as well as, I kept saying life's busy. And again, running wasn't the stressor. Like you would think this would hit during a marathon cycle. It was hitting during a 10K cycle. But life was busy. Like I was working overtime. My kids were running around. My husband was in a new job. We were trying to adjust to a new schedule that he had. And then the next symptom was like, things are aching. Like I know we never feel good as like middle-aged distance runners. Like you never have a day where you feel just amazing. But like I would wake up and be like, man, my feet hurt today. My knees hurt. Oh, and my calf hurts. And now this hurts. And now this, like, and I would wake up and be like, I cannot walk in to anyone's office and say, everything from my waist down hurts. What's wrong with me? But it wasn't an injury. So I was like, it's fine. I just need to do more. I need to strength train more and foam roll more and add more to my schedule that's already packed. And then I need to recover better. Well, there's like no more time in the day because with summer schedules, which we were talking about, summer schedules hit with the kids, which is chaos. There's no schedule. You're just like fending for yourself and trying to work a full-time job, entertain kids, drive them. Summer didn't slow down. It got busier. And that's where I thought I would have this slowdown and all this time to train on top of the heat hitting and travel plans. And I think it was the mental stress that got me, of trying to squeeze in a run and be a good mom and be an employee and keep your house clean and get the grocery shopping done. And then you're supposed to sleep 8 hours, but the most I could get in with still getting up to beat the heat was 6 hours of running, which anyone knows for marathon training is terrible. You can't have 6 hours of sleep and recover and do a good job. So it all kind of hit me. And I think the day where I realized and messaged you that this is overtraining syndrome, like it still hadn't dawned on me. It was just like, oh, I need to time manage better. I kept putting on myself, you need to manage your time, get your head on straight. Let's go. You've got things to do. Is the day I laid in bed and I had a long run and I had nothing else on the schedule that day. And I said, I just don't want to. And that's not normal. And not only do I not want to, I mean, yeah, there's days where like, I don't feel like running today and I'm going to do it anyway. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And when I said that, after being a passionate runner for well over a decade, I'm like, oh. And I kind of even said, like, I wonder if I can coach without actually running. Like, what would that look like in my world? Because I kind of like it still, but I don't want to do it. And that was where I kind of thought, like, holy crap, that's the hallmark right there of overtraining syndrome, is when you suddenly, without any other reason, are just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I've had athletes do that, but I still could not see all those lead up signs to myself of poor recovery, stress, low motivation, injuries that aren't even really injuries, just everything hurts. Nothing dawned on me until that moment where I said, I don't think I want to run anymore. And that was like, okay, we need to like change course here. This isn't working.
Well, and I think that hits the nail on the head, and how hard it is to identify, both in yourself and even from the outside too, from the coaching perspective. You're in the thick of summer training, and it's really hard to identify in the summer what is real and what is the weather playing mind tricks on you, or not mind tricks on you, literally putting more stress on your body. But there's a fine line between, the amount of stress and load that you can handle in the summer and just the mental strain of training in the summer. And like you said, this was not an intense training cycle for you yet. So looking at your training schedule, that wouldn't be the first thing that you jump to. You wouldn't jump to overtraining. But what we need to understand about overtraining syndrome is that it's not actually overtraining, it's under recovering. That's what overtraining syndrome actually is. And that's where the recurring theme in your story was, oh, life is just busy. Oh, life is just busy. Life is just busy. Like that kept coming up. Boom. That's the thing right there, was the under recovery. And just, you had so much stress. You know, we say this time and time again, stress is stress is stress. Your body doesn't know the difference between outside stress, your mental, family, work, you know, all of those things. Your body reacts the same way. You are losing sleep. You might have a low appetite. Your cortisol levels are high from life stress, not necessarily from training stress and physical load. So this is where it just becomes really tricky to identify, because you had so many explainable things going on at the same time, but they were all going on at the same time.
All at the same time.
So that's one of the keys right there, is when you have a highly motivated athlete, you are an athlete who lives to train. Like, we've even had, you know, race after race that the actual race day didn't go well. And like you said, despite that, you're so eager to jump back into the next training cycle because you love to train. Training is the good stuff. It's the good part. And you came to that point of, I don't want to do this anymore. That's so unusual.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've identified what the issue is. What did you do when you started to realize that this was accumulating stress? You were not recovering the way you needed to, not even only from running, but just from all of the stress that was in your life. What did you do?
Stopped running. I took
Completely?
Well, not completely. So, so like, you know, there's the textbook overtraining thing we learn as coaches, is to not run for at least 3 weeks. Like, you're supposed to just take it off the table, let your body recover. But I didn't feel like I wanted that either. I didn't know what I wanted, and I still don't know what I want, which is a different place, because like I said, I have been training for marathons for 10 years, off and on. So I've always had structure. I've always had a plan. There's a plan of action, and now that's gone. There's no plan. Like, I'm not injured. There's no recovery from injury. Like, we're not, okay, we start 3 days a week with some slow miles and then we'll start building. There's no need for that. What I did is I kind of took the plan off the table for me. Like, okay, we're not going to do this. And then part of, during this whole period, I also decided it was a great idea to get my Macmillan certification, because why not add more crap to the table, right? So like, I did that. And what I liked about his philosophy with prescribing easy runs is there's a range. It was, you can run for 30 or you can run for 45 minutes, like no longer than this, but no less than this. And I was like, we kind of talked. I'm like, this is a plan I think might work well for me. So it gives me options. Like, you have time for 20 minutes today, that's the base. But if you feel good, you can go as high as this without risking doing too much. So we kind of played with that idea. And then I still wasn't hitting my runs because, again, life was busy, and, you know, or I felt like it was more productive for me to do something else. So I kind of, we laid out this plan that was not really a plan. It was like, here's choices each day with some optional cross training or running, just kind of see how you feel that day, just to keep fitness up. So I did a lot more biking. I've missed my Peloton bike. And when you're training for a marathon, there's not a lot of time for that. You know, to add in these extra cross training things, because you need to recover. So like, I can't hop on the bike in the afternoon and jump out for speed work the next day. So I got on my bike a lot more, which I've missed, and realized, oh, I really love getting on my bike twice a week. This is fun. I did more strength training because that had fallen by the wayside with trying to train, because all I could fit in was a run. So my strength, I lost some strength there. And then I took some time just to chill, like read my book. Like, you know what? I'm not going to run today. I'm tired. I've had a busy last few days and I just don't have the energy to go run, and I don't feel like it. So I'm just not going to today. And I'm going to give myself grace to sit here with an extra cup of coffee on the couch this morning and read a chapter of a book, because that's what my brain needs. And then I would run when I felt like it. Like, if that day I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to go out and run, I would sometimes do 2 miles. Sometimes I do 6, like, it just, whatever felt good in that moment. And my long runs, like last weekend, I hadn't done anything long for several weeks, nothing over 45 minutes. And I just went out with a friend. I was like, I'll just go as long as I feel like I feel good. And so I went out for an hour. I thought I would go out for 40 minutes. I'm like, no, I might go do 3 or 4 miles with you. I went out for 6 miles because it was fun again. Like that run became fun. I had good company. There was no pace prescription. There was no mileage prescription. And I'm like, I got to 4 miles. I was like, I think I actually do want to keep going. And that was the first run that told me I think I'm ready to start coming back because I had fun. Like it was a very enjoyable hour and I felt great. And then today was my second longest run probably since this all started. And I went out for like 7.5 miles. And even though the heat was bad, like it's like you were talking to Scott, like you have this base and I'm thinking I'm probably not fit enough to go more than 6 miles right now. I haven't really been running. But like 7.5 miles, I mean, if it wasn't so oppressively hot today, I probably would have gone further because I just felt good in my skin again as a runner. So I don't know like where that's going to go. It's strange because I'm extremely type A. I normally have a plan for the year. I have no plan right now, which in some ways is extremely freeing because I don't know the last time I've been running without a true path of where I'm going. It's nice to kind of have that freedom. Like today, like, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'll just see where the wind takes me. Whatever route we take through town and end up, that's where I'll go. Like, it's kind of nice to just not have that, the weight of training sometimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I want to highlight here real quick too, that if this were overtraining from a pure running perspective, I think we would handle this differently. I think, when we talk about, looking into REDS, relative energy deficiency syndrome, or, injuries coming on from high mileage or high intensity, we would handle this a lot differently in that we would take running off the table for a period of time. It wouldn't be, hop on the bike to get some cross training. It wouldn't be go for whatever feels right. It would be more of a strict, nope, nothing. No cross training, no running. So I just want to emphasize that too.
Yeah.
But I think what is probably more common that we see is this sort of a scenario that you are overwhelmed. You have too much on your mental load, on your outside stress. And that's where it can be really freeing that you are doing movement. There's just no structure, plan, or pressure on what it is, when it is, how long it is, all that sort of thing. So you mentioned it feels freeing a little bit to not have a plan and not have a goal on the table. And maybe you don't know the answer to this yet, what do you see as the long-term path? Do you think that you are burned out on racing and running being a competitive sport? Or do you think you're just in a season of life that you need to let it ride and you need to enjoy it for what it is now, and that you may come back to the competitive aspect of it?
I definitely think I'll be back competitively. I have too many goals that I still want that I definitely like deep in me. So like, okay, I want to do this and this and this. I think it's a lesson for me because I'm such a planner that this is making me step back and say, you can have these, but I just don't know when yet. I think it's going to be a very seasonal approach. Like I'll probably pick a fall race. I feel like I want to, but I just don't know what that will be yet. It might be the week before. Like I might say I want to do a half marathon tomorrow. Let's just sign up, which is not me. This is not my personality. So it's very different to be on the side of the thing. But I had a good friend who suggested a spring marathon, and my reaction was like, I don't think I want to go. Like even if everyone goes, my friends go, like I don't think I want to do that. Like it's just not where I want to be. And that was probably 3 weeks ago. So I was still kind of in the thick of like, I don't want to run right now. But then I had another friend over on Saturday and she was mentioning a different race. And I was kind of like, oh, that would be fun. So I don't know. And I think I'm not allowing myself to sign up for anything for at least a month, just to like figure out, when the kids are back in school, what is our schedule looking like? I think an early spring race could work in our lives with how, my kids' sports schedules work. I don't know. Like, I don't know where or when that will be. I would love to go back and run one more marathon at least. But I don't want to do it the way I have been doing, where it's just crammed into my schedule and I'm not doing it the right way. So it may be a couple of years before I go back into that distance and maybe work on speed for a while. I don't know. Like, I feel like it's so strange. I just don't know. Like, and the first time I think in my entire running life where I haven't been following a structured plan or have at least a goal on the calendar. And there's like literally nothing happening, and I've never been in this position, which is weird. Like it's weird. um
I think it's both of you being in a similar moment right now of like, just, I'm not quite sure where this is going for the immediate future. I think people should know and understand that that's okay. Like, you're not less of a runner or less of an athlete or anything like that if you are not currently working toward a racing goal or currently have a set running schedule, miles per week and workouts and that sort of thing. That the whole point of this sport, and I think what I'm hearing both of you talk about that is helping you to be patient, is knowing that you love doing this activity. This is something you really enjoy, something you really love. And so that makes it easier to prioritize in the micro, in this moment, prioritize your health and taking care of yourself so that you can come back to this thing that you love and enjoy it again and be productive again. And that all of that stuff is going to come back. But running isn't racing. Running isn't competing. Running isn't following a rigid structure. The whole point of all of this is joy, enhancing your life, enhancing your health. And if it's not doing those three things at the bare minimum, then reevaluate. It's not working. But it sounds like, hearing both of you talk, that those are sort of the things that are guiding you through this wait and see phase. And you both seem so okay with the wait and see phase and being patient and not quite having a true north yet.
yeah.
I think it's been that was sort of what spurred this podcast on, is that I think it's important to share that. And I think you both are doing a really good job of that. And it's inspiring to share how you're doing that, why you're doing that, and what is upcoming, how you're handling this phase and how you're going to get through it. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's a lot, I know, and it's very personal, and it's a lot to share. But is there anything? I feel like you have more that you wanted to say, Michelle. I don't want to
No, there's a
interrupt.
quote, and I'm actually going to Google it right now because I can't remember the exact quote. But it was like, I'm going to find it while we're here. But it was like, it's not coming up. An elite runner said it. And it was like, run far, run long, but never outrun your love of running. And it's a quote I used to have up on my wall. And is that right? Is that the correct quote? And
I think the quote is exactly correct. I've heard that before too, but I couldn't tell you who it is.
I can't tell, and I really want to give them credit because I feel like that fits so well in this podcast. Like, the whole point is to continue doing this forever. Like, we're not pro athletes. Like, our paycheck doesn't depend on how fast we're running. So it's just, it's the point is to keep running forever and have fun with it. And it's I don't think I realized how much fun I wasn't having until the last 2 weeks where I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like, I do like this. And like, it's, it's hard. Just catch yourself in that.
I want to add on there too, it doesn't even matter that you're not a pro athlete or this isn't your living.
Right.
Like, because even if it is, even if you are competing at a high level and earning money in this sport, the same rules still apply. You should still be finding joy in the process. And that doesn't mean every single day. Some days individually are going to suck, and that's okay. But in a grander sense, like, the goal is still your health. Even when you are at that level of peak performance and at the top of the sport, the goal is still health. And maybe there's some temporary performance health imbalance. But if that ever gets too skewed, you can't perform if your health is in the gutter.
Right.
So even if your primary goals are performance, health has to be a big piece of that equation. So yeah, I love that. Never outrun your joy of running. That's a good way to wrap us up. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to add, just on wisdom that you have gleaned from your current experiences, or anything you are learning as a coach being in the position that you are currently in? Do you feel like going through challenges like this make you a better coach at the same time as you are reevaluating your own running and athletic goals?
100%.
Definitely.
Like I thought I was good prior to this of being, sympathetic and just kind of being able to, look at an athlete and say, okay, we're going to get through this. You're going to get through this. Kind of looking at the big picture. But now it just, yes, it makes things so much more eye opening, right? To look at it as every athlete has their own stressors that they're going through, and that's what I like to call it, is stressors, right? Like an injury is a stress, or life is a stress, job is a stress, like all those things that yeah, my experience allows me, or it's allowed me, I think, to be able to kind of identify and communicate better with athletes, and to be able to pinpoint,
Mm-hmm.
like if you see a note, it's like, damn, this run sucked. It's like, well, why did it suck? Like, yeah, the heat's bad, but and
Right.
so I think yeah, I think 100%. I feel really good as a coach, having gone through what I'm going through, because it helps me to be able to just be better. I guess the best way to put it is be better listener and communicator of other athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before I may not have
Mm-hmm.
really heard maybe what they were saying. So it's been hugely helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it's understanding the whole not having a goal thing. Like I've never understood that. And so, like if someone just needs to maintain fitness, like that's a whole new world. And I think that's cool. But I also think the burnout is real. So this is the first time I've truly felt burned out, to hear someone say like, I can't run today, or seeing athletes who aren't training, it's starting a flag, more of a flag, not like they just don't feel like doing this today. It's like,
Yeah.
what's happening in your world that's keeping you from doing this? And also asking, like, we talked about this last week, like, do you still want this? Because it's okay to not want this.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to let your goal go. Like
Mhm.
it's not a failure, it's a pivot, and just something else. And that's, we're human, that happens. Like we're not robots that are going to follow everything to a
Mm-hmm.
T and hit a goal. It doesn't happen like that.
I think that's key. It's okay to change your mind. And I think in the coach athlete relationship, in the thick of the summer, there's a fine line to walk, right? Between wanting to get through the summer because there's another side, and people are going to feel better on the other side, but also weighing that, is this true burnout? Is this a true problem? And it is okay to change your mind. If you have set off down one path and it's not working for you, it's not admirable to just continue down that path anyway. It is admirable to change your mind, adjust, and that is okay. I think I have told athletes before that part of what makes me a good coach is that I have made so many mistakes in my running life. So I've made the mistakes, I've learned through them. And I'm not saying that what you guys have done is mistakes, because it's not. You're in very different scenarios. But each challenge, each error, each failure, all of that makes you a better athlete for yourself. It also makes you a better coach for other people. And we don't coach entirely just from self-experience. I don't think it's good coaching to only coach from your own self-experience. But I do think your personal experience makes you a better coach, and helps you to relate to your athletes also, and your athletes to relate to you. So yeah, I think this was great for us to sit down and talk in a little bit more detail and depth about both of you and how you are working through this. And yeah, just thank you both for sharing. I know this was a little
Of
bit
course.
more personal and deeper, and it wasn't easy to share as much as you shared. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. We are the More Miles podcast. You can find us at More Miles to Go. You can also find us on YouTube at More Miles Run Coaching. Sorry, moremilestogo.com is our website. You can find us on YouTube at More Miles Run Coaching and on Instagram at More Miles Run Coaching. And this episode is available on Spotify or anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening. Thanks again, guys, for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.